That night, I left a pack of donuts from Martin's supermarket on top of the office desk and forgot to eat them. I remember that before I remember the fear. They were plain donuts, cracked glaze, inside a plastic clamshell that rattled whenever someone walked by. Every time I shut the counter drawer, the lid would vibrate a little. That bothered me more than it should have. I'd worked 9 years at that meat distributor on the south side of Logansport, not far from US 24. The building wasn't big like the processing plants near County Road 125 West, but it got enough freight to keep 3 cold rooms full almost every week. We sold to smaller grocery stores, restaurants on E-Market Street, and a few buyers out of Peru and Delphi. It wasn't a pretty place, it was functional. Gray painted floors, white panel walls, the smell of citrus disinfectant trying to cover raw meat, wet cardboard, and old grease. In the summer, the docks got flies. In the winter, the outside air pushed through the gaps and mixed with the steam rolling off the coolers. I knew every discomfort in that building. That's why it took me so long to accept that something was wrong. The shipment ran late because of a load coming out of Lafayette. The driver missed an exit, then said his GPS had sent him down a farm road somewhere near State Road 25. That load wasn't the return that had come in at the start of the week. At the time, I didn't know there was another Lafayette delivery buried in the reports, one that Don, Marcy, and Earl had already talked through without me. By the time it finally backed into Dock 2, Evan was already complaining about his shoulder. Marcy was stomping her feet on the concrete to stay warm. And Don Keller was saying nobody respected schedules anymore since the pandemic. It was one of those nights where everybody gets sharp. Nobody actually fought. We just didn't talk much. The last forklift shut down at 7:43. I know because I logged it in the report. The battery was low, and the yellow warning light was blinking on the dash like a tired eye. Evan left the keys on the hook, apologized for ducking out before the sweep was done, and headed out yanking his jacket up by the broken zipper. I should have told him to stay. I still think about that. Marcy left right after, a Dutch Mill coffee cup forgotten in the cab holder. Don went out the side door, grumbling that he needed to pick up screws at McCord's the next day. We'd been joking about that for months. Everything in that building needed a screw, some tape, or a threat. When the side door slammed, the place changed. Not dramatically, not like in a movie. It just got too big. With no voices, no forklift, and no radio on, I could hear small things that normally disappeared. The click of the thermostat, the hum of the fluorescent lights, water moving through some pipe behind the wall, my own boot sticking to the floor in spots where the cleaning solution hadn't dried yet. I closed Dock 1, then Dock 2. Checked the seals on 2 pallets going out early to Kokomo. Marked the clipboard with the blue pen that Raylene hated because it skipped in the cold. She always said a cheap pen was the beginning of the end for any business. The pen skipped 3 times that night. I laughed to myself on the 3rd one. It was a short, dumb laugh. The kind that slips out when your body wants to pretend everything is fine. Right after, I felt embarrassed, even though there was nobody there to hear it. The cooler area was down a low hallway, left of the sorting room. Cooler 1 was for poultry. Cooler 2, beef cuts. Cooler 3 sat at the far end, set aside for smaller loads, packaged cuts, returns, and anything nobody wanted to reorganize that same day. It had always been the most problematic one. The door seal kept stiffening up. The outer panel had old impact marks on it. The drain would clog whenever chunks of ice broke loose from the threshold. Don used to say Cooler 3 had a bad attitude. I said machines didn't have attitudes, just deferred maintenance. That week even I stopped making jokes. On Monday, the door showed up with a thin layer of mist on the outside. That happened sometimes when humidity spiked, but this mist wasn't even. It formed broken lines, like someone had dragged their fingers across the still damp metal, and stopped mid-motion. Not scratches. That made it worse. It looked like pressure without intention. On Tuesday, there were small puddles on the floor in front of the door. Not drips, not streaks. Flat, separate puddles spaced apart like marks left by something heavy that had stood still long enough for the ice frozen to its body to melt. Evan figured it was a leak. Don pulled the drain cover off, sniffed it, swore, and said it wasn't coming from there. On Wednesday, the dent showed up, low, right near the seal. The door panel had pushed inward in an oval shape, wider than my forearm. It didn't match a forklift tine. No metal scrape, no paint pulled off. It looked like someone had leaned a shoulder into it and waited. I wrote dent, no clear cause in the report. That phrase stayed with me afterward. That Thursday night, I tried not to look at Cooler 3 until I'd finished everything else. Checked the temp on Cooler 1. -2. Normal. Cooler 2. 0. Acceptable, but I noted it for Dawn to look at. I wiped down a smear near the scale and threw out a torn glove someone had left on top of boxes of frozen burger patties. Small thing, the glove was green. We don't use green gloves. I stared at it for a few seconds, like the color was some kind of question. Then I tossed it. Maybe it came and stuck to a delivery. Maybe a driver had dropped it. I accepted that explanation because I needed to accept something. My phone buzzed at 8:12. It was my son, Cole. I didn't answer. I knew he wanted a ride after practice, and I'd already arranged for his friend's mom to take him. His car had been acting up for days, and I'd told him not to drive at night until we got it to the shop. Cole agreed the way teenagers agree when they want to end a conversation, not when they actually plan to listen. Still, the guilt hit before the fear did. Guilt always shows up on time. I picked up my phone, typed leaving in 20, deleted it, typed talk soon, deleted that too. In the end, I just sent, wrapping up. He replied with a thumbs up. The screen lit up my hand for a second. My fingers were red from the cold. My thumbnail had a chip of dark red polish on it, leftover from a sad attempt to look less exhausted at my sister's birthday. I put the phone away and walked to Cooler 3. The hallway felt colder than the rest of the floor, not cooler cold. I knew what that felt like. This was a heavy, still cold that came in through your nose and made the back of your teeth ache. The air smelled like wet metal and packaged meat, but there was something underneath it. A muffled animal smell, like wet fur sealed inside a plastic bag. I stopped before the yellow line on the floor. The light above Cooler 3 flickered once. It didn't go out, just dimmed and came back. The metal door was covered in a thin layer of mist, but not the normal kind. The uneven markings were back, lower now, crossing each other, like something had pressed different parts of its body against the panel. I thought about condensation. I thought about a bad seal. I thought about Don calling me dramatic, even though he'd never actually used that word with me. Then I realized I couldn't hear the motor. Cooler 3 was never quiet. Even when the compressor cycled off, there was still some internal echo, a crack of ice, a vibration in the panel. Right then, nothing. The silence didn't feel like the absence of sound. It felt like weight pressing the whole hallway down. I took one more step. My boot crunched over rock salt scattered on the floor. The sound was small, dry. Right after, on the other side of the door, something shifted. Not a bang, not a drag. A weight transfer. The kind of sound a large body makes when it stops resting on one part of itself and shifts to another. Low, controlled, too close to the panel. I didn't think the word werewolf right then. Nobody thinks a word like that inside a distribution warehouse with spreadsheets open in the office and donuts going stale on the desk. I thought trapped employee. I thought livestock. I thought for one ridiculous fraction of a second a live steer delivered by mistake. The handle on Cooler 3 was a simple lever, thick, built for thermal gloves. I reached out my hand. Stopped before I touched it. The mist on the metal pulled apart slowly, right around the height of my face. Not from heat, not the way it looks when someone breathes against a window. It was an uneven sideways opening, revealing the dark panel underneath. I didn't open Cooler 3 that night. That's one of the parts that embarrasses me most when I tell this story. Not because opening it would have been smart. I know now that it wouldn't have been. But because the reason I pulled back wasn't caution. It was a small, almost domestic irritation. Like whatever was in there was holding me up on purpose. I had a spreadsheet to close out, a temperature report to send, and a son waiting on my reply. My body chose to turn fear into annoyance because annoyance was easier to work with. I lowered my hand before touching the lever. "Not tonight," I said. My voice came out quiet, but it hit the metal, and came back to me, thin, weightless. There was no response from the other side. No new movement either. The door just sat there, white and damp, with that dent near the seal looking deeper under the failing light. I walked back to the office without running. I remember that clearly. I walked too slowly, like someone might accuse me of being scared. Every step made the floor grab a little at the bottom of my boot. In the hallway, the smell of cleaning solution got stronger, and I was grateful for it. Any familiar smell was better than that muffled odor coming from the cooler. When I stepped into the office, the donut box was still trembling slightly on the desk. There was no draft in there. The window was fixed shut. The AC was off. Even so, the plastic lid was shaking in short, almost polite little pulses. I stood there watching it for a few seconds, waiting for an explanation to show up on its own. Then I noticed the radio. The small radio that sat on top of the cabinet. The one Evan used to catch Pacers games at low volume was out of place. Normally it sat facing the door, its bent antenna leaning against the wall. That night it was on the floor, underneath Raylene's chair, with the back panel cracked. I hadn't heard it fall. I crouched down slowly and picked it up. The plastic was too cold, like it had been sitting inside one of the coolers. There was moisture on the side. Not enough water to drip, just a thin film that left my fingers damp. The screen was dark. I pressed the button. A loud, sharp burst of static came out and I almost dropped it. The sound filled the office with thick, broken noise. I turned the volume down, but the static stayed the same. I tried to turn it off. It wouldn't turn off. That radio's batteries had died the week before. I had written a note to myself to buy new ones. I stood there holding it, listening to that broken noise. Mixed in with the static were small cuts, like breathing picked up badly by a cheap microphone. It didn't sound like a voice, it didn't form any words. It was just rhythm. In and out. In and out. I set the radio down on the desk. It stopped. Right then. The donut box stopped shaking too. I can't fully explain what I felt. It wasn't panic. It was a hot flush of embarrassment crawling up my neck, like I'd been caught taking part in something stupid. I got mad at myself for giving any weight to a broken radio and a cheap plastic lid. I picked up the landline off the wall to call Dawn. The line was dead. The display still showed the time 8:19, but there was no dial tone. I pressed the hook twice. Nothing. I tried my cell. No signal. That happened inside the building sometimes. The metal walls killed everything. I'd have to go to the side door or out to the lot if I wanted a decent signal. First, though, I checked the cameras. The monitor sat on a high shelf, split into 8 squares. Dock 1, Dock 2. Cooler hallway, front office, lot, main entrance, dumpsters, back hallway. The cooler hallway camera showed door number 3. The image was grainy, gray, almost no contrast. Still, you could make out the yellow line on the floor and the wet shine on the metal. I bumped up the brightness using the old controller taped to the shelf with electrical tape. That's when I saw what was wrong. On the monitor, Cooler 3's door was open a crack. I thought the recorder might be lagging, replaying an old frame or corrupting the signal like it had done before. But that dark gap looked too present. It didn't look like a camera error. It looked like something happening in a different time. I looked down the hallway through the office's interior window. From where I stood, I could see part of the cooler area, but not the full door. Just the start of the white wall and the shadow at the corner. Nothing looked open. The hallway was still quiet. I looked back at the monitor. The door was still cracked open. A black gap ran down the right side, thin, vertical, darker than it should have been. Inside it, there was no fog, no emergency light. No faint glow from the interior bulb being left on. Just black. I grabbed the controller and switched to another camera, then switched back. Same image. The door open. My stomach did a small, dry drop, the kind you get going over a hill too fast. I didn't want to leave the office. I also didn't want to sit there watching that gap on a monitor. There was something deeply wrong about looking at an open door on a screen and not being able to confirm it with your own eyes. I grabbed my keyring. The keychain had a bottle opener shaped like a fish, a dumb gift from Cole when he was 12. He'd bought it at the Walmart on E Market Street with birthday money. I thought it was ugly at the time. I never took it off the ring after that. I squeezed that metal fish until it pressed into my palm. I left the office. The hallway looked the same, but something in the air was different. Not colder, drier. The moisture that had been coating the metal of door 3 had pulled back in spots, leaving uneven patches like islands. I walked until I could see the full door. It was closed, all the way closed, lever horizontal, seal flush, no gap. I stood there, not breathing right, staring at a door the monitor had sworn was open. Behind me in the office, the radio started up again on its own. This time, underneath the static, came another sound. A single knock against metal, not on the cooler door, on the inside of the wall behind me. I spun around fast. The back hallway was empty, but the side door, the one Don had walked out through, wasn't fully shut anymore. The latch hadn't caught. It was breathing in the gap, moving almost nothing, back and forth like someone outside was holding the handle and not sure what to do with it. I thought about wind. I thought about Don coming back. I thought about Marcy forgetting something. Then the side door opened 3 inches, stopped. Outside, the lot was white under cold light. Past Dock 2, near the dumpsters, there was a dark patch on the ground, too big for an oil spill, too thick for water, and pressed against the outer handle I saw only part of something. 4 long fingers, not a full hand, just fingers, gray, damp, with thick nails touching the metal without understanding it. Like the body behind them had found the door by accident. The radio shrieked louder. The side door swung slowly shut, and I was still standing there with my keys in my hand, squeezing that metal fish like it could save me. The first thing I did was lock the office door. That didn't help anything. The door was hollow core wood, with a glass panel in the middle and a lock that anyone with a good shoulder could blow right through. Even so, I put the key in, turned it twice, and pulled the handle to test it. The motion settled me down for about 5 seconds. Then the building came back into existence around me. The radio was hissing on the desk. The phone line was still dead. The monitor showed cooler 3 cracked open, even though I had seen with my own eyes that it was shut. And the side door, down the back hallway, had just moved with those fingers pressing from outside. Not a hand. Fingers. I had to repeat that to myself because my memory kept trying to fill in the rest of the picture. It wanted to turn what I'd seen into a torn glove, a branch, a piece of tarp, anything that would fit in a report. But no branch rests against a door handle like that. No tarp has knuckles. I went back to the monitor. The lot camera was jumping with interference. The Dock 2 feed was cut through with horizontal lines. Near the dumpsters, the dark patch was still on the ground. In all that gray grain, it looked smaller, less threatening, almost ordinary. I held on to that. Maybe it was hydraulic fluid. Maybe a truck had leaked in the lot. Maybe Marcy had spilled coffee, even though I knew coffee didn't spread to that size and didn't stay thick under a security light. I switched to the back hallway camera. The side door was closed. The handle wasn't moving. The screen kept stuttering, like the video was running behind. The clock in the corner read 8:21, but my phone already showed 8:24, 3 minutes off. That happened sometimes when the system rebooted. Don had been promising to replace that cheap recorder forever. Right then, I got angry at him, not at whatever was outside. At Don. Angry that he hadn't bought the parts, hadn't tightened the screws, had walked out the door complaining about McCords while I was standing here with a camera failing and a door breathing. It was unfair. I knew it. But your head picks smaller targets when the real one is too big to look at. I tried calling him on my cell, no signal. I held the phone up above my head near the office window like that was going to do anything. 1 bar showed up and disappeared. I sent a text anyway. Did you come back? It sat there unsent. The radio stopped hissing. The silence that followed was worse. I could hear the refrigeration on cooler 1. I could hear a crack in the wall. I could hear my own breathing, short and ragged. But from cooler 3 there was nothing. No motor, no ice settling, no sound of machinery working to keep meat frozen. That was my responsibility. That was the stupid part. Even after the fingers, the radio, and the monitor lying to me, part of my brain went straight to product loss. Thawed merchandise, invoices, insurance, a customer complaint out of Kokomo. Raylene asking me the next morning why I hadn't checked the temperature. So I opened the drawer and grabbed the handheld thermometer. It was a yellow model with a metal probe on a coiled cord. We used it to check suspicious product. I held it like a weapon, which almost made me laugh again. I didn't laugh. My mouth was too dry. Before I left, I saw the donut box. I grabbed one. I don't know why. I bit off half and didn't taste it. The glaze stuck to the roof of my mouth. Remember the texture, brittle and sweet, and the absurdity of chewing while something was circling the building. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself it was still just a work night. People at work eat whatever junk is lying around. I unlocked the office and went out into the hallway. Every few steps I looked back and forth between the side door and cooler 3, splitting my attention the way you drive on an icy road. The emergency light made the floor shine in patches. The rock salt spread near the threshold looked like dirty beach sand. When I got close to cooler 3, I noticed something else. The dent in the panel had gotten bigger. Not by much, by enough. The oval mark now had a thin crease down the center, like folded skin. I pressed the thermometer probe against it without touching the metal with my hand. The door made a low, hollow sound. It didn't sound like the wall of a cold storage unit. It sounded like a thin tin can. The thermometer screen blinked. 7, then 3, then 12. That made no sense. The probe wasn't even inside the cooler. I pulled the thing back and tapped it twice with my fingers. The screen went dark, came back on, and read 28 degrees, an almost impossible temperature for that frozen hallway. That's when the latch on cooler 3 clicked. One small click, mechanical. The lever didn't drop. The door didn't open. But something inside had pressed hard enough to make the seal complain. The rubber let out a short, damp squeak like a boot pulling out of mud. I took 2 steps back. The word came then. Not fully formed, not as certainty. As a shameful word, the kind you don't want to admit even to yourself. Werewolf. I didn't picture a full moon, a curse, or an old movie. I pictured weight, muscle, gray skin visible through patches of wet fur, those fingers on the handle. A body too large to be where it was. Cooler 3 clicked again. This time the panel light above it went out. The hallway was cut into dim light coming from the other rooms. The door was still visible, but it lost its edges. It looked deeper, closer. My cell buzzed. I almost screamed. It was Cole. His message had come through late. "Mom, are you actually coming?" I stood there looking at it, and some ridiculous part of me thought I still had to answer as his mom. Not as someone trapped in a warehouse with something behind a door. As his mom. I typed, "Yes." The message didn't send. Behind the door, something scraped across the floor. Not scratching, not trying to get out. Just shifting. Like a large animal that had been still too long and was just now remembering how big it was. The handle on cooler 3 shook once. It didn't turn. Just shook like it had taken a hit from the wrong side. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall behind me. The thermometer dropped out of my hand and broke on the floor. The sound felt too loud. Plastic cracking, metal skipping, my breath caught in my throat. From inside, a rush of air hit the seal. The mist peeled open across the metal in one wide, low, uneven strip. And for 1 second, through the small square window on cooler 3, I saw something pass behind the frosted glass. Not the whole body, just a dark curve. Tall, too close to the door. Then an eye. Not red, not glowing like a headlight. Just pale, catching the weak hallway light in a wrong way, like it sat too deep in the face. It was gone. The motor in cooler 3 kicked back on by itself. The sound exploded down the hallway, heavy, normal, industrial. And that normalcy was what made me run. I ran back to the office and locked the door again. This time, I wedged Raylene's chair under the handle. Then I dragged the metal filing cabinet in front of it, scraping a bad sound across the floor. The cabinet was old and heavy, packed with old invoices and forms nobody had the nerve to throw out. I'd complained about that thing for years. Right then I was glad it existed. I stood there bent over my knees, breathing through my mouth. The taste of glaze was still stuck in my teeth. That turned my stomach. I had just seen an eye behind the frosted glass of cooler 3, and I still had sugar in my mouth. I ran my tongue across the roof of my mouth until it almost hurt. The monitor was still on. Cooler 3 cracked open. Real hallway, closed, lot, dark patch. I needed to get out of the building or get a signal. Those were the two options. There was no bravery involved. It was simple math. If I stayed inside, the building belonged to that thing. If I went out, maybe the lot did too. But at least there was sky out there, a fence, a road, and US 24 less than 2 minutes away by car. My phone showed one bar near the window. I called 911. The call dropped before the first ring. I tried again. Nothing. I texted Cole, "Don't come here." It stayed pending. I wrote to Don, "Something's in the building. Call the police." Pending too. I thought about recording a video. I don't know why. Maybe for proof later. Maybe because some very stupid part of me still believed that if something fit on a screen, it would seem smaller. I opened the camera and pointed it at the monitor. The image was shaking. My hand was shaking. In the video, Cooler 3's door looked open, dark, waiting. Then the phone camera lost focus on its own. Not the whole frame. Just the gap in the door on the monitor turned into a wide, black smear, like the phone was refusing to resolve that one spot. Everything else was sharp. The timestamp, the grid lines, the corner of the dock. Just that opening. Nothing. I stopped recording. That's when I heard the first sound from the ceiling. Not above me. Farther back, over the sorting room. A weight being dragged slowly across the low roof, making the metal frame answer back in small pops. It wasn't running. It wasn't jumping. It was distributing its weight carefully, like an animal testing thin ice. The building had roof access out back, near the maintenance ladder. Don always said raccoons got up there. Raccoons don't cave in cold storage panels. Raccoons don't have long fingers on door handles. The sound stopped above the hallway. Right after, the office light flickered. Once, twice, went out. The monitor held its image a few more seconds on the old UPS battery. Then it died too, leaving the office lit by nothing but my phone screen. I didn't scream. I'd like to say I stayed in control. But the truth is worse. I was too busy trying to remember where I'd left my purse. I thought about my purse before I thought about dying. It was in the bottom drawer with my card, my driver's license, and a dried-up lip balm I hadn't used since Christmas. I grabbed the purse. I also grabbed a box cutter, one of the small retractable ones. The blade extended less than an inch. Ridiculous. I put it in my pocket anyway. I moved the filing cabinet carefully. The chair scraped the floor and I stopped every inch, waiting for some sound to answer. Nothing came. I opened the office door and felt the cold from the hallway come in like water. Cooler 3 was closed. The light above it was out. The motor was running. That combination made me dizzy. Everything looked too normal and too wrong at the same time. I moved down the hallway without looking at the small window in the door. I kept my eyes on the floor, on the yellow line, on the salt patches, on the broken thermometer. When I reached the side door, I looked out through the glass strip. The lot was white, not snow. It was the cold light from the overhead lamps reflecting off wet concrete. The night in Logan Sport had that empty gas station color, somewhere between blue and sick. Past the fence, you could make out the dark line of trees toward the Eel River. For a second, I thought I caught another low reflection between the trunks. Small, pale, separate from the lot lights. When I looked again, there was only the dark tree line and almost no wind moving through it. A truck passed far off on Market Street, and the sound of it felt like it came from another month. The patch near the dumpsters was larger than it had looked on the monitor. I opened the door just wide enough to squeeze through. The outside air smelled like old diesel, cold meat, and river. The wind hit my face and made my eyes water. I took 3 steps to the corner of Dock 2 where the phone usually got a better signal. 2 bars. I called 911 again. It rang once. Then behind the dumpsters, something pushed the green container. Not much. Just enough for the wheels to complain against the concrete. The dispatcher said, "911, what's your emergency?" I opened my mouth. From behind the container, a tall, dark shape rose, more like a shoulder than a head. Sparse tufts clung to gray skin, wet, pulled tight over bone. The shape kept rising slowly, but stopped before showing the rest of itself. The phone dropped out of my hand. The dispatcher kept talking from the ground. The thing didn't move toward me. It just stayed there, incomplete behind the green metal, like it was also listening to that small voice coming out of the phone. Then the phone, flat on the concrete, lit up with a message that had finally gone through. From Cole. On my way. No warning at all. Cole's message glowed on the concrete like something alive. On my way. I could hear the 911 dispatcher talking through the phone, but her voice sounded too small to belong to the real world. I couldn't answer. My mouth was open, the cold was hitting my teeth, and the shape behind the green container hadn't moved. Only part of it was showing. One high shoulder, a piece of tilted neck, gray skin between dark matted tufts. No full head visible, no legs, no complete body. The thing looked too large to be so hidden behind an industrial dumpster. The voice on the phone said something about location. I crouched down slowly. The concrete was frozen under my fingers. I picked up the phone without taking my eyes off the container. The box cutter was pressing into my thigh from inside my pocket, useless and hard. When I brought the phone to my ear, my hand was so damp I almost dropped it again. Distribution warehouse, I said. That wasn't the company's name. Sutton was my last name. I still don't know why I said that. I corrected myself fast, stumbling over the words. I gave the address on South Secot Street near the US 24 exit. I said there was someone in the lot. I couldn't say something. I couldn't say werewolf. A word like that, spoken to an emergency dispatcher, would have made me a psychiatric problem before it made me a victim. Looks like a large animal, I said. From behind the container, the fingers appeared first. They touched the metal edge with a wrong kind of gentleness. They didn't grip. They didn't pull. They just landed there, thick nails scraping the peeling paint. Then the shoulder dropped and disappeared behind the dumpster again. The dispatcher told me to move to a safe location. I almost laughed. A safe location was a pretty phrase for someone who didn't know that building. I stepped backward, still with the phone to my ear. The side door was about 12 feet away. The office, further back. The front of the building was on the other side of the sorting area. My car was in the parking lot near the main entrance, but Cole would come down the same street. If he pulled into the lot before the police got there, he might honk. He might call out for me. Maybe that thing would respond to sound. My son is on his way here, I said. The dispatcher asked his age. 17. The word broke something in me a little. 17 still sounded young when said out loud. At home, Cole already seemed almost grown. That night, in the white lot, he turned into a little kid again. I went back in through the side door and locked it. The latch caught with a dry click. I pressed my back against it for a second. Nothing pushed from the other side. Nothing knocked. That was worse than a knock. At least a knock would have told me where it was. The call dropped. I looked at the screen. No signal. I swore so quietly I could barely hear my own voice. The sorting area was dark except for the emergency lights. The stainless steel tables looked longer in that light. There were plastic bins stacked up, bags of industrial ice, rolls of labels, a scale that was switched off. The smell of packaged meat came in waves mixed with wet plastic. I went to dock 2. The button for the overhead door was on the side panel. My plan was simple. Open the dock, get out on the far side, and run around to the front before Cole turned into the lot. It was a bad plan, but it was a plan. I hit the button, nothing, hit it again. The motor tried to respond with a short groan and quit. On the panel, a red light was blinking. Fault. Dock 1's door was the same. Dock 3, too. All of them locked down. The whole system had frozen when the power cut out. Don knew how to open them manually. I knew too, more or less. There was a chain hanging off to the side, thick, greasy, connected to the overhead mechanism. I pulled. The chain dropped a foot and jammed. I pulled with both hands. The metal burned my skin with cold. The door came up maybe 2 inches, just enough to let in a dark line along the floor. Outside, air pushed through, smelling of diesel and standing water. Then something passed in front of the gap. Fast. I didn't see a body, just a shadow cutting across the light from the lot. Then, from outside the dock, came a low tap against the metal. A single contact. like the creature had pressed part of its face or shoulder against the door to feel the vibration. I let go of the chain. The door dropped the 2 inches with a thud. I went still. From the other side came a short, wet sound of breathing through a snout. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't loud. It was close. Warm enough to push through the gap for a moment and carry that smell with it. Wet fur, old meat, cold earth. My phone buzzed in my hand. Text from Cole. On market. 5 an hour. I started typing, "Don't come in, turn around." No signal. The message sat there, stuck. That's when I heard the first sound inside the building coming from behind me. Not from Cooler 3, from the office. The chair I had used to block the door fell to the floor. Then came the heavy scrape of the metal filing cabinet being pushed a few inches. My whole body went cold from the inside. I had locked that door. Cooler 3 was behind me, down the cooler hallway. The side door was locked. Doc 2 had something waiting outside. And now something was moving inside the office. I didn't think there were 2 of them. Not yet. My brain wouldn't accept multiplying the impossible. I thought about the layout, about ceiling crawl spaces, the maintenance room. Any passage too tight for a grown man, but maybe not too tight for that. The cabinet scraped again. 1 more inch. I backed up until I hit the stainless steel table. An empty bin fell to the floor and the sound bounced around the room. Outside the dock, the thing breathed harder, like it had heard. Then, through the office's interior window, I saw my phone screen reflected in the glass. Not the phone in my hand, a different light. In there. On the desk, the landline lit up on its own, showing the wrong time, 3:33. The fallen chair moved, very slowly, not pulled by a hand, pushed by something too large trying to fit through a small space. I ran toward the cooler hallway because it was the only direction that was clear, and as I ran, Cooler 3 went quiet again. The cooler hallway felt shorter than before. I know that doesn't make sense. The building hadn't changed. The distance between the sorting room and Cooler 3 had always been the same, marked by yellow paint on the floor and crooked warning signs on the wall. But with every step I took running down it, the end came up too fast. Behind me, the stainless steel table shook. Something hit it. Not a wild crash. The clumsy impact of a large body pushing through a space built for people. Bins fell. A roll of labels bounced across the floor. I heard the scale tip over and the plastic cover crack off. I didn't look back. My phone was still in my hand. The screen was lit up with the stuck message to Cole. Don't come in. Turn around. 3 useless words frozen there without signal, while my son drove up Market Street thinking I was just running late. Cooler 3 was right ahead. Closed. No motor. No light. The door looked whiter in the dark, like clean bone. The mist had come back in wide patches, but now there were dry sections on the metal, long and vertical, at chest height. Like something had pressed against it from the inside and pulled the cold right out of the panel with its own body heat. I stopped in front of it because there was nowhere left to go. To the right, wall. To the left, stacks of empty plastic bins. Behind me, the sorting room and the noise coming from it. In front of me, the Cooler 3 door, with that low dent near the seal. I thought about going in. That was the worst idea of my life, and it still seemed logical for a second. A cold storage door is thick. If I got inside and locked it from within, maybe I'd buy some time. Maybe the police would show up. Maybe Cole would see the cruisers and stay out. Then I remembered I didn't know what was already in there. Or maybe I did. The lever on Cooler 3 trembled, just barely, like something on the other side had touched it without understanding the mechanism. It didn't turn, it didn't pull. It just received pressure. The rubber seal groaned again, damp and compressed, and the smell came through the invisible gap. Wet fur, old meat. That metallic undertone that stayed in the back of your throat. Behind me, something entered the hallway. I felt it before I heard it. The air changed. It became occupied. A heavy warmth pushed the cold from the coolers against my back, and the hair on my arms stood up inside my uniform sleeves. Then came the sound. Thick nails on painted floor. 1 step, pause, another step. It wasn't moving on all 4s, not exactly. It wasn't walking like a person either. The weight came down uneven, like the joints hadn't been built for that hallway. Something scraped low, maybe a claw, maybe skin dragging along the corner of a bin stack. I turned just my head. I saw less than my brain tried to hold on to. A dark shape filled part of the hallway entrance. One arm appeared first, too long, hanging at the body's side, sparse tufts matted against gray skin. The hand touched the white wall. 4 dull claws left shallow marks in the grime. Not in the metal, just in the thin film of grease that every meat facility carries even when it looks clean. Above that, part of a face tilted into the light. Elongated snout. Skin pulled tight. One pale eye catching the faint green of the emergency exit sign. I didn't see the rest. Thank God I didn't see the rest. My knee hit the plastic bins. One of them fell. The dry sound traveled down the hallway and made the thing stop. It didn't roar. It didn't howl. It didn't do anything dramatic. It just opened its mouth enough to show uneven, wet teeth and let out a short exhale through its snout, like it had found me by smell and didn't need to hurry. That's when my phone buzzed. Signal. By some stupid miracle, the message to Cole sent. Right after, another one from him came through. Already in the lot. I made a sound I didn't recognize. Not crying, not screaming. Kind of broken laugh with no humor in it at all. In the worst moment of my life, I thought about how he was probably still wearing that thin blue jacket, the one I kept telling him to replace because it did nothing against the wind. I thought about that more clearly than I thought about the creature. The thing took one step forward. I pulled the lever on Cooler 3. The door swung open. The cold hit me like a wall. Inside, the emergency light was faint and bluish. There were pallets leaned against the wall, boxes of packaged meat, a toppled shelf, and moisture marks on the floor. There wasn't enough room to hide properly, but there was an interior safety chain, the kind used when someone needed to work with the door cracked open. I went in, I pulled the door. Before it closed, the creature was there. I didn't see the whole body. Just the arm coming through the gap, long gray with dry muscle under the skin, and patches of fur like it had been pulled out in clumps. The hand hit the edge of the door. The claws slipped on the metal. The impact threw my shoulder into a frozen box. The pain burst white behind my eyes. I pulled the door with both hands. It wouldn't close. The arm was still jammed in the gap, bent at a wrong angle, pushing without knowing how to use a handle. There was no intelligence in it. Just force, weight, hunger, persistence. I grabbed the box cutter from my pocket. The blade came out too short. I drove it into the first piece of skin I could reach anyway. The creature pulled its arm back. It didn't scream. It made a low, guttural sound, more like trapped air than pain. The hand disappeared from the gap, and I threw my whole body against the door. The seal caught. I turned the interior lock. Then I hooked the chain. I stood in the blue dark of the cooler, shaking, holding the broken box cutter, while outside the door the werewolf pressed its weight against the metal. Once. Twice. On the third time, the panel caved in near my face, and the phone in my hand started ringing. Cole. I let the phone ring twice, not because I thought it through, not because I had a plan. I just looked at Cole's name on the screen, and for 2 full rings I couldn't move my finger. Cooler 3 was shaking around me. Outside, the werewolf was pushing against the door with its body, not pounding like someone trying to break through. Worse than that. It would lean its weight in, pull back a little, lean in again. The metal accepted each push with a deep pop. The panel had already started bowing inward, right at the height of my face. I answered. "Mom?" Cole's voice came through small and choppy. I almost cried just hearing it. "Get out of there," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was low, squeezed thin by the cold. Inside the cooler, the air cut at my throat. I could smell the frozen boxes, hard plastic, old blood trapped in packaging, dirty ice in the drain. "Where are you?" he asked. Behind the door, the creature breathed. Cole heard something because he went quiet. "Mom, do not get out of the car. Leave right now. There's a cop car out here. Cole, listen to me. Leave." The call broke up for a second. Static came through. Then his voice came back. I saw a door open. My chest tightened. "Which door?" "The side one, the one to the lot." I turned my face toward the cold wall of the cooler like I could see through it. The side door was far from there, past the hallway. past the sorting room. I had locked it. I was sure. The memory was clear. The dry click of the latch, my back pressed against it. But that night, things that were closed didn't stay closed. The cooler door caved in a little more. The interior chain pulled taut. One of the links groaned. I looked at the toppled shelf, the pallets, the boxes. There was an old emergency exit at the back of Cooler 3, a low hatch that opened into the technical corridor running behind the refrigeration units. Don called it the maintenance hole. Nobody used it. It was narrow, filthy, and always blocked by boxes somebody had promised to move. Right then, it was a way out. Maybe. "Cole, stay in the car," I said. "Lock the doors. Don't honk. Don't call my name." "Mom, you're scaring me." I laughed. It was awful. A short, senseless laugh that came out full of steam in the cold. Him telling me I was scaring him while something was trying to fold a door with its body felt like too bad a joke not to escape. "Good," I said. "Then do what I say." The call dropped. At the same moment, the werewolf stopped pushing. The silence inside the cooler got enormous. I could hear the faint vibration of the compressor, very far away, like it was coming up from underground. I could hear my sleeves brushing against my uniform. I could hear the blood beating in my ears. Then came a sound in the hallway. Not right at the door. Farther away. One step, pause, another step. It was moving away. For 1 second, I felt relief. Right after that, I understood. Cole was in the lot. I clenched the phone between my teeth because my hands weren't working right, and started pulling boxes away from the maintenance hatch. The first one dropped and hit my ankle. The pain shot hot up my leg. The second was frozen to the floor. I pulled until a nail broke inside my glove. Stupid detail. I thought about my manicure. I thought about how my sister was always saying I never took care of myself. The hatch appeared behind the pallets, gray, low, with a rusted handle. This one I could open from the inside. Just a simple latch, no key. I turned it, it didn't open. I turned it again, harder. The rust held for a second, then gave with a crack loud enough that I froze, waiting for the creature to come back. Nothing. Just the distant compressor and my own breath going white in front of me. I squeezed through sideways. The technical corridor was narrow, lower than I remembered. I had to hunch over. Pipes ran along both walls. There was dust stuck in old condensation, scraps of electrical tape, faded maintenance labels with dates on them. The air was less cold but dirtier. It smelled like machine oil, rust, and dead mouse. I pulled the hatch shut behind me without being able to lock it. I crawled a few yards, my shoulder hitting pipes. The phone lit only a small circle ahead of me. The screen had a crack in the corner from the year before, when I dropped it in the Walmart parking lot. Cole kept telling me to replace it. I kept saying it still worked. It still worked. In the middle of the technical corridor, I heard my son shout, "Mom!" It wasn't loud. It came through muffled, through walls and metal and distance. But it was him. I killed the flashlight on my phone by instinct. I stayed in the dark. Right after, I heard the werewolf moving through the building. The sounds came in sequence. First, nails on the sorting room floor, then a dry impact against a table. Then something knocked over near the docks. It wasn't running. It was tracking, scenting, adjusting its body to the space. Each sound was getting closer to the side exit. I kept crawling. The technical corridor curved and ended behind the maintenance room, near the electrical panels. There was a grate at the end held by 2 latches. I pushed the first one. It opened. The second was stuck. On the other side of the wall, Cole called out again, quieter this time. "Mom, there's something near the dock." I hit the latch with the broken box cutter, once, twice. On the third hit, it gave. The grate swung inward into the maintenance room. I went down on both knees on the concrete floor, arms numb, ankle throbbing. The room was dark. The smell of old grease and wet sawdust was thick enough to turn my stomach. I grabbed a wrench off the workbench. Heavy, cold, real. The maintenance room door opened into the back hallway. I cracked it open just a sliver. I saw Cole first through the glass in the side door. He was in the lot, outside the car, phone in hand. My son in that thin blue jacket standing in the white light, staring toward Dock 2. And between him and the side door, Crossing slowly out of the shadow's edge, part of the werewolf moved through. Just the hunched back. Just one arm, too long. Just gray skin shifting under sparse, matted fur. Cole didn't see it, but I did. And for the first time that night, I stopped trying to survive in silence. I screamed his name, not as loud as I imagined a mother would scream. It came out torn, ugly, barely any voice left in it. Cole heard it anyway. He turned toward me. So did the werewolf, not with its whole body. I just saw the upper part pause in the shadow between the dock and the side of the building. One shoulder pulled back. The snout appeared for less than a second, too low, like it was using smell before sight. The white light of the lot caught a piece of the face and showed tight, wet skin with sparse tufts matted along the jaw. Cole didn't move. "Get in the car!" I screamed. He didn't listen the first time. He never listened the first time when he was scared. He'd stand there trying to process it, trying to build the picture in his head, like the world was going to give him time for that. I pushed through the side door and came out. The wrench was in my right hand, my phone in my left. My ankle was throbbing and every step sent the pain shooting up to my knee. The lot air cut at my face. It smelled like old diesel, wet garbage, and that animal odor that seemed even stronger outside the building. The werewolf didn't run. That scared me more than if it had. It moved through the light slowly, always partly hidden by something. The dock corner, the container, the shadow of the parked truck. I kept seeing pieces, an arm too long for its body, ribs pressing through gray skin, the curve of its back rising and falling with heavy breathing. "Cole!" I screamed again. That time he snapped out of it. He ran for the car, slipping on the wet concrete. He had his keys in his hand. I heard the alarm unlock, that short, stupid beep. The sound made the creature turn faster. I threw the wrench. I didn't come close to hitting its head. The tool hit the green container with a metallic crash that rang out across the whole lot. The werewolf stopped, its head tilted toward the sound. For 2 seconds it worked. Cole got in the car and pulled the door shut. I could see his face through the window, white, mouth open, eyes searching for mine. He looked 12 years old again. I almost forgot to run. Then his engine didn't start. It made that dry sound of a weak battery, once, twice. On the third try, I felt so much anger it almost crowded out the fear. Anger at the car, at the night, at myself, at having let my son buy that used sedan from a man in Peru who swore it had just been serviced. The werewolf took one step toward the car. I screamed without words and slammed both hands against the side of the dock. It hurt. My fingers exploded in pain. But the sound pulled its attention again. The creature turned toward me. That time I saw the eye, pale, deep set, catching the overhead light like dirty glass. I ran for the front of the building, not fast, not clean, limping, slipping, bouncing my shoulder off the wall. Behind me, I heard Cole trying the car again. The engine cried and quit. The main entrance was around the corner near the small parking lot. There was a glass door with the company sticker on it, a vending machine that hadn't worked in years, and 2 dried-out planters that Raylene insisted on keeping there, even though nothing had ever survived in that corner. When I came around the corner, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. Don's truck, parked on the dark side of the building out of direct camera range, near the fence that backed up to the tree line toward the Eel River. The driver's door was open. The interior light was on. His cap, the brown one with the grease stain, was on the seat. Don hadn't left, or he'd come back. For a second, that gave me hope. Then I saw his hand, not his body, just his hand, hanging out of the open door, fingers resting on the gravel. There was blood on the sleeve of his jacket, but not a lot. The strange part was something else. He was holding the manual override controller. The small emergency panel kept locked in the maintenance room, the one that controlled both Cooler 3 and the containment door on the old dock. I got close enough to see his face reflected in the side window. Don was alive. His eyes moved. "Leah," he said, barely any air behind it. "I came back," he whispered, "after the rest of you cleared the shipment. I was trying to reinforce the lock on 3 before you noticed. Didn't make it in time." His voice sounded like it was coming out of a broken radio. I knelt beside the truck. The smell of blood came mixed with old coffee and tobacco. Don had a deep cut across his abdomen, held together with a soaked cloth. His flannel shirt was open, and his skin had that gray color of meat that had been in the cold too long. "What happened?" I asked. He tightened his grip on the controller. "You weren't supposed to close up alone." That sentence didn't land right away. "What?" Behind the building, Cole tried the car again. The engine failed. I heard the werewolf respond to the sound, nails scraping concrete. Don squeezed his eyes shut hard. I locked it in 3. My throat closed. "You knew?" He tried to breathe and choked. I grabbed his shoulder and my hand sank into a wet patch of his jacket. "It came in on the return truck," he said. "Not all the way in. Injured. Thought it was a bear, big dog, something. Marcy saw it too. I sent her home. The lot seemed to tilt. Marcy had seen it. Don had seen it. I hadn't been alone in this story from the beginning. I'd just been left to find out the rest after they decided it was something they could handle with a quick fix." "Why didn't you call anyone?" He opened his eyes. There was shame in them. A small human shame, easier to hate than the creature. "I called animal control," he said. They laughed. Then I called Earl. Earl owned the distribution company. My stomach dropped. He said, "Don't stop the operation." Don whispered. That was the thing that almost made me stand up and walk away from Don right there. This wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just fear. Someone had made the choice to keep running the operation with that thing locked in Cooler 3 because a delayed load cost money, because customers complained, because thawed product meant losses. Don coughed. The lock didn't hold. Right then, from the other side of the building, Cole's car finally started. The engine revved way too high. The werewolf moved. I didn't see it. I heard it. An impact against the side of the car. Cole screamed. Glass cracked. I stood up. Don grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "Leah," he said. "It's not the only one." I went still. "What?" He looked toward the dark tree line behind the fence. "Out there near the Eel River, past the reach of the lot lights, something moved between the trunks. Then something else, not full bodies, just pale reflections, low and separate. 2 eyes, then 2 more. Don let go of my wrist. The one that got into the cooler was the smallest. Cole's engine was screaming from the other side of the building. Not acceleration, panic. A tire spinning on wet concrete, a brake pedal hit wrong, glass cracking again. My son was alive. That was the only thing my brain could hold on to. Alive was still a big enough word to make me move, but I didn't run straight to him. I got stuck for a second staring at the dark tree line behind the fence. Out there, past the white lot light, toward the Eel River, the pale reflections were shifting between the trunks. Not together. Separate. Low one moment, tall the next, like each body was choosing a different posture to move in. Don had said the one in the cooler was the smallest. The sentence didn't seem to fit in the air. "How many?" I asked. He made a sound that could have been a laugh or pain. I don't know. That answer made me want to hit him. I didn't. He was bleeding, half folded out of the truck, with the Cooler 3 manual override controller still gripped in his hand. But the anger came clean, stronger than any sympathy. "You locked that thing in there and let me close up alone?" "I thought the lock would hold till morning." "You thought?" My voice came out too loud. From the other side, there was a dull impact. Cole's car hit something, metal on metal. Then the horn went off, continuous, frantic. The tree line reacted. 2 pale reflections rose. Not all the way. Just enough for me to understand that the horn had drawn the attention of things that were still outside the light. Don grabbed my wrist again, weaker this time. "The controller," he said. I looked at the piece in his hand. A small gray panel with a red cutoff button and a selector switch. I'd seen it in the maintenance room before, locked in a box. Don used it when he needed to shut down Cooler 3 for repairs. What for? Containment door on the old dock. It took me a second to put it together. The old dock was in the back hallway, sealed off for years. It wasn't used for freight. It had a heavy interior steel door that separated the old section from the side lot. Earl had never had it removed because it was too expensive. The door could still drop if the secondary circuit held. "Can you seal off part of the lot?" I asked. "Part of it. Part. Everything that night was part. Part of the creature. Part of the truth. Part of a chance." Don tried to hand me the controller, but his fingers gave out. I grabbed it before it hit the gravel. The plastic was sticky with blood. I shoved it into my jacket pocket and stood up. "Leah," he called. I looked at him. Earl's going to deny everything. I almost said I didn't care, but I did care. Not right then, not more than I cared about Cole. But part of me already knew that this story needed to survive past that night. If it didn't survive on paper, it would die as an accident, an animal attack, a break-in, an electrical fault. Whatever was most useful to someone with insurance and a lawyer. Don breathed with difficulty. In the office, Raylene's drawer, return report. Marcy signed it. Right now, proof. The horn kept going. Cole screamed something I couldn't make out. I should have gone straight to him. Any normal mother would have. But a normal mother also knows that if nobody believes what happened, the thing keeps happening. That cut through me cold. I hated Don for giving me an impossible choice and hated myself for understanding it. I ran for the main entrance. The glass door was unlocked. I came in through the small entryway, where Raylene's dried-out planters had been knocked over. One of the dead plants had spilled dirt across the floor. I remember that because I almost slipped on it. Old dry dirt, useless. An absurd detail in the middle of all of it. The office was open, the chair knocked over, the filing cabinet shoved aside. Nothing inside. I went in, pulling air through my mouth. The donut box was on the floor, crushed. One of the donuts had my boot print on it. The radio was quiet, snapped in half on the desk. The dark monitor reflected my face back in pieces. I went to Raylene's drawer. Locked. "Of course," I said. I pulled out the broken box cutter and forced the lock. The blade bent further. My fingers were shaking. The horn outside made everything feel too urgent, and every second inside that office felt like a betrayal of Cole. The lock gave. Inside there were folders, peppermint candies, receipts, and an unmarked yellow envelope. I opened it. Return report. Truck inbound from Lafayette. Arrival time altered. Load partially refused for external contamination. Marcy's signature. Don's signature. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in Raylene's writing. Large animal found trapped near pallet 18. Earl instructed no incident report until loss is assessed. I read that line twice. Large animal. Not werewolf. Not creature. Large animal. That was how cowards made the impossible manageable. I took the envelope and tucked it inside my jacket. When I turned to leave, the landline rang. One old, harsh ring that nearly knocked me apart from the inside. The line had been dead before. Now it was ringing. I shouldn't have answered. I answered. "Leah?" It was Raylene. My mouth opened and nothing came out. "If you're still in there, go out the front. Don't use the docks." "Raylene?" Her voice was shaking. "Marcy called me. She didn't go home. She's at the gas station on Market. She said she saw two more on the road behind the truck. Behind me, one of the screens on the dead monitor came back on by itself. Cooler hallway, Cooler 3's door open, empty." "Raylene," I said. "What?" I stared at the grainy image. On the hallway floor, in front of the cooler, there were wet marks heading in the opposite direction from the sorting room. Not toward the lot, not toward Cole, toward the front of the building, toward where I was standing. The phone got heavy in my hand. Outside the office in the main entrance hallway, I heard low breathing press up against the glass. The breathing on the other side of the glass didn't sound like an attack. That was what kept me frozen in place. There was no pounding, no claw scraping, no body throwing itself against the front door. Just that heavy air fogging up the lower part of the glass, like the werewolf was crouched outside, too close to the entrance, listening to the phone in my hand. Raylene was still talking. "Leah, are you hearing me?" I didn't answer. In the dark reflection of the dead monitor, I could see part of the glass door. Not enough to see the whole creature. Just a tall shadow bent outside the angle of the light. And for a moment, something pale near the level of the handle. It didn't touch it. It didn't try to open it. It just passed close, slowly, like the metal had some important smell to it. My cell buzzed. Cole. The message came through late. Too short. I'm okay. Car hit the fence. I'm hiding. My knees almost gave out. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call his name the way I did when he was little and got lost in the grocery store aisles. But the breathing was right there on the glass, and Raylene's voice was coming through the landline like it was traveling up from somewhere underwater. Leah, the police are on their way, she said. But Marcy told me something. The shadow outside moved away from the door. Slowly. What? My voice came out so quiet I barely recognized it. The return truck didn't come straight from Lafayette. It made a stop first, near a shuttered meat processing plant in Monticello. The driver didn't put it in the manifest. The hallway behind me went cold. Not cooler cold. The cold of realizing that the start of this story might not have been in this building at all. Why? I don't know. Marcy heard him arguing with Earl. There was a transport cage in the trailer. Big one. Broken. A cage. That word sat in the office worse than any growl. I looked down at the envelope inside my jacket. Large animal. No incident report. Assess loss. All of it written with the same clean office chair cowardice. Outside, Cole's car horn stopped. The silence that followed opened up room for smaller sounds. Dripping somewhere, plastic creaking, the distant motor of Cooler 1. And coming from the back of the building, a new sound. Meat thawing. Anyone who works in this industry knows it. It's not quite the sound of water. It's packaging giving way, liquid releasing, boxes breathing in the wrong temperature. Cooler 3 was open and empty on the monitor. Whatever had been stored in there was starting to lose its chill. I don't know why that scared me more than anything else. Maybe because it meant time was passing. Maybe because the building was still just a building, even with all of that inside it. I left the office through the interior door, not the front. Raylene was calling my name on the phone, but I left the receiver hanging. The broken box cutter was in my pocket, useless. The old dock manual controller weighed down my jacket, sticky with Don's blood. I went through the side corridor where we kept cleaning supplies. There was an overturned blue bucket, rags gone stiff from the cold, and a yellow wet floor sign leaning against the wall. I remember the sign because I thought stupidly that someone could still slip. I heard the werewolf before I saw it. It was between the entryway and the sorting room, off my path but close enough that I could smell it. Wet fur, blood, cold earth. I didn't see more than part of its back passing behind a stack of bins. The gray skin shifted under sparse tufts. One shoulder clipped the doorframe and it stopped, adjusting its weight. This wasn't the smaller one. I understood that without needing to see it whole. That body took up space differently. Taller, slower, more certain of itself. The one from Cooler 3 had moved like a trapped animal. This one moved like an animal that knew where the exit was. I held my breath and kept going toward the old dock panel. I hit the red button. Nothing. I hit it again. The system answered with an electrical snap. Somewhere in the building, a heavy door began to drop. The sound came thick and metallic, dragged down by years of rust. The werewolf turned. Not toward me, toward the sound. I ran. I got out through the narrow gap between the building and the fence, where weeds had pushed up through cracks in the concrete. The wind hit my face. Outside, I could see Cole's car sitting crooked against the fence, one headlight broken and pointing at the ground. He was crouched behind the low barrier near the vending machine, blood over his eyebrow, both hands pressed over his mouth. I signaled him not to make a sound. He was crying without any noise. Behind us, the old dock door finished dropping with a heavy thud. For 1 second, I thought we'd made it. Then I heard, from the other side of the fence near the Eel River tree line, a short call. Not a howl, not a voice. A low, guttural sound, like air being forced through a damaged throat. From inside the building, something answered. Then another answer, farther away. Cole grabbed my arm. In the direction of US 24, red lights appeared. Cruisers. Finally. Those lights should have brought relief. Instead, they lit up for just a moment, the fence behind the building. There was an opening in the chain link, not torn inward, outward. and in the wet gravel moving toward the river, there were wide, uneven tracks mixed together with Don's blood and water from the coolers. Some of the tracks were small, others were much larger. The police arrived shouting our names. I held Cole. I looked over his shoulder at the tree line. Out there, something pale caught the red light one last time. Then it was gone. 11 months have passed. Earl sold the distribution company. The official report lists animal attack and operational negligence. Don died before the ambulance arrived. Marcy disappeared 2 weeks later, somewhere between Logansport and Monticello. The police never found the old circuit's manual controller among the evidence collected that night. They asked about it twice. I told them where I'd last seen it, in Don's hand, then in my pocket. But when they made the official inventory, it wasn't anywhere. Last week I received a box with no return address. Inside was the old circuit's manual controller. The same panel Don had been holding that night, still cold.